We succeeded by getting nearly 45 people to apply for the job of executive director. Apparently, our name is far and wide out there. And a lot of them were pretty good. At least 4 of them we interviewed. But the one who stood head and shoulders above all the others was Beth Merrill, who originally is from this area, but spent 40 years of her life in Connecticut doing a variety of different things to prepare herself for this role. Beth Merrill.
Thank you. All right, well, good morning. Thank you. I'm only going to take a couple minutes. It's a long meeting day today. Again, my name is Beth Merrill, and to begin with, somebody said to just talk about your life. Well, that would be a really long story. So I borrowed a quote from Charles Dickens, who was alive during the whole Grant thing. And to begin my life, with the beginning of my life, I record that I was born. Switch. Well, I am a native of Hudson Falls and Fort Edward, and even though that sounds strange, I was born and I lived in the town of Fort Edward. But I went to Hudson Falls Central School, so I'm 2 different towns. I have an MBA and MBA from Albany, so obviously I stayed around. And after that, after my MBA, I departed to Connecticut for, as Tim said, 40 years. My career was all consumer-facing, so I worked with businesses, business units, consulting, et cetera, that always talked to the consumer, as opposed to selling to, an airline or selling to the government. So everything in my career was trying to understand what kinds of things are needed, and how do we get them the proper item or service in the proper way. I had a Fortune 100 experience. I was an entrepreneur. I owned my own company for a dozen years. I was a consultant for profit and then later not for profit in Connecticut. And lastly, I was the executive director of, strangely enough, the Trail. So, and I can tell you, I didn't know how to build trails before I went there, so I do now. My history interest came definitely from my dad. His family came over, some of them to Mayflower, so they've been around a long time. And he loved history. And the story that I've told often is that he would pile the 4 Merrill kids in the backseat of the car on a hot summer day with no air conditioning back in those days. And we would just tool around doing stuff, and that involved stopping at every one of those blue historic signs everywhere. And it was from groans in the backseat of not another one that we would learn about history of the area. This is my great-grandfather, who was actually in the Civil War. He was a New York State Heavy Artillery, 16th Heavy Artillery, New York State. His 2 locations where he was active was Williamsburg, Virginia, so he was the Army of the Potomac. And then they were transferred to, as his records say, which I've gotten, say, in defense of the White House. And so my great-grandfather, reportedly, reputedly, I'm not sure, family lore says that he and Lincoln spoke briefly, which I thought was a bunch of bunk until I saw it said in defense of the White House. And Lincoln was frequently out there with his troops. And my great-grandfather was a wee mite of a guy. He was about my size. I'm 5'2½". He was 5'3". Lincoln obviously was quite tall. So the joke had to do with size, and I thought that was charming that got passed down as family lore. Anyway, so my family has always had an interest in history, which came down to me. And so I like to think of history as something that's alive, that speaks to me, that speaks to the people who come to see historic places, that the memory of these people is not just memory, it's something that should go forward to help us better understand our lives, ourselves, and this is where you find yourself. So now I'm enamored with a new guy, and he's coming up shortly, and you know him. So I introduce you to Grant.
Nicely done. Is that AI?
Is
He's transitioning to special features.
And someone said, if you say my name, I will never die. So, Grant, thank you.
And the man who takes care of the money for Grant Cottage is Mike Lesser. Thank you. The report.
Okay, forward. Forward. Keep going. Keep going. Stop. Okay. I'm just going to go very briefly over our accounts. Our financials are in the process of being finalized by our CPA, and the filings will be done sometime over the next few weeks. Those are all going to be public, so if anybody wants a copy of the annual finances, we can certainly send it to you. This still says draft on it, but it's fairly finalized. As you can see, our total assets are $433,000. And that's the total amount of cash plus our inventory for the store that we have on hand. The reason it's down significantly from the previous year is the $250,000 grant that was given to us towards the fire suppression system, which was paid out last year to parks as partial payment for the $1.2 million fire suppression system, which is currently being installed. There's also some decline in the value of our investments in the community fund because the stock market is down, as everybody knows. But we do remain reasonably solid in terms of the monies that we have. Of that $433,000, approximately $100,000 of that is earmarked monies that we can only use towards construction of the pavilion that we have planned. The rest of it is reserve funds. So we're in fairly good shape in terms of having enough reserves in case our income becomes interrupted. The next one? The one that shows, yeah, okay, so this shows our total revenue from everything. As you can see, our gift shop is doing quite well. We made $26,000 net profit on our gift shop. The gala produced about $20,000 in income for us, which is, again, that's earmarked towards the pavilion. The bad news is we run a small operating deficit, and we continue to do that. So we are very, very dependent on contributions and fundraising. So if any of you know potential sponsors or other contributors that we can solicit, we really need that. We're going to talk a little bit about the coming season, which could be somewhat truncated because of the construction that's going on at the cottage. So we will be challenged this year in terms of meeting our operating expenses. So we really are going to need to go after fundraising and sponsors for the year. If there's any questions about anything relating to the finances of the cottage, I'd be happy to answer them. And as I said, once our filings are finalized, we have a report that we have to submit to the Attorney General's office called the chart file, which includes the accountant's report as well as our IRS filing, and that should be done sometime shortly. Those are public, and if anybody wants a copy of it, we can certainly give you a copy of it. So does anybody have any questions for me as the treasurer? Okay, I will turn it back over to Tim.
And as an extra set of eyes on all that money, Joyce Musco is our audit committee chair. Joyce?
Good morning. The audit committee is mandated to report annually to the members of the Friends on the financial condition of the organization. The committee met and determined, the committee is Jean Waters and I, met and determined all financial processes are working as intended. Our financial condition is sound. We currently have sufficient reserves to contend with unknown financial emergencies that may arise and to cover the mission of the Friends Group. Our total account balance when reported last year was $392,559. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. Very much so. Now, an important characterization of our Board of Trustees, the re-election and election of trustee members, supervised by our Board Secretary, Mary Flanagan.
This year we have 2 new board members that were elected, and we welcome Jonah Cullen and Patrick Green. And re-elected to serve a 3-year term this year are Joyce Musco, Dr. Jack Myers, Kathleen Smith, and Melissa Trombley-Proche. In addition to that, we had 2 instances for our Constitution that were voted on as well. One being a change in our mission statement. We don't need to go into that one, but more importantly, we have also created trustee emeritus position. And we are pleased to announce that Jeannie Waters is a trustee emeritus. We also have an honorary trustee position, and that is being filled by Treat Williams.
Thank you, Mary. And now a report from our new Executive Director, Beth Merrill.
Go ahead, next slide, please. As referenced before, our opening date is May 26th, and we're thrilled to get that off and running. We will be open from May 26th, which is a Friday through Memorial Day. Then we reopen again Thursdays through Sundays until our cottage is open. For those who didn't hear earlier, the cottage is, they're doing the fire suppression system and reinstalling all the furnishings to the cottage, and we're working closely with our good friends at State and Parks to make sure that this happens as timely a fashion as possible. But at the moment, we're looking at least a 2-week delay. And to accommodate our public and to let the public know that we are open and ready for business, we will be doing the hidden history hiking tours until the cottage can be fully opened. And we've gone over some of the things that will be said on the tour, and it's going to be a great tour. It'll keep us in the public eye until we can actually have the cottage open for business. Programs. Melissa and group have a phenomenal, I think it's 11 different programs, 12 programs for us this year, covering a wide range of things that Grant would have done or that people that surrounded him would have done, and making history relevant for us all. The first one is actually the opening weekend. Is that a Sunday or the Monday, Melissa?
Sunday.
That's the Sunday, and that's O.P. Clark and his wife?
Yes.
Thank you. And I'm looking forward to seeing that. So we hope you'll all turn out for that event. We're very excited. The Visitor Center is fully stocked and ready to rock and roll. They've done a great job from everything I've seen in the past, and we anticipate Pat and company to do a phenomenal job this year as well. Thank you for that. Our volunteers, the team training and initiation is May 6th, correct? And I think we may have some representative from our friends at Parks, I think. Was that you, Lisa, coming to that? Yes, somebody?
Yeah, because we'll go over
There's
house.
some wonderful protocols that they have to help us be as professional as we can in terms of tour directors for historic sites. Lastly, I apologize to Colette because she's not Marcom. She's marketing and development, but I screwed up, so I apologize. But that's the same person. She's doing an awful lot of things, and she's been working very hard on all the open communications. Because obviously, every time we have a new date on something, we have to jump in and not only correct our website, but also make sure all the public and all the people we need to know. And on top of that, she's worked on this event and also the membership and et cetera, et cetera. So I will say I have a very hardworking team. We should all be very proud of the things that they've accomplished, which had nothing to do with me. I just inherited this, but I'm grateful. Next slide, please. Okay, our next step. I had some chats with Reed, who is here today, regarding fundraising initiatives, and we're going to be holding a meeting. There's some back street talking on how we get that all done and together, but we do know we have to raise funds. The delay in opening alone puts us 2 weeks in the hole, which is about 10 grand. So we do want to raise some funds, and also every nonprofit should have a certain amount of events on top of programs that are strictly for fundraising. So we're going to try to figure out a system or a way that makes sense for us to be able to do that without killing ourselves and get some money in the hopper. Let's see, the strategic development plan, there's going to be a public review. Has everybody in here seen what is going on so far? If not, there's some, I don't know who's talking about that.
I will.
You will, okay. There's going to be a public meeting because that's part and parcel of what you do when you look for funds and you have to be vetted. Okay, one of the things that we're hoping happens sooner rather than later is, you know, we got an extra plot of land, which we're very grateful for. We have some wonderful plans for it. However, right now it still looks like it's part of a prison and it's certainly not very welcoming for anybody that goes up the hill. Near the cottage, you can see this fence with the razor wire on top, and it's very off-putting. So we're hoping that we can find a way to get that down as quickly as possible, so at least it looks like just land that needs to be developed as opposed to where we put bad visitors. Okay, last but not least, one of the things when I came on board, people that I know said, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I said, I'm going to work with Grand Cottage. I said, the historic site, da-da-da-da-da. Comments were, I went there when I was a kid, haven't been back, and this is just random. What was that place again? Where is it? And somebody actually said to me, how many rooms do you have to rent? And so, despite the fact that you guys are well immersed and you know Grant like nobody's business, there's a lot of people who don't. And I consider that low-hanging fruit in many ways because they don't have to travel very far to get to us. But they don't really know what it is. And so that's something that we'll be working on in the next year. There's plenty of ways to do that. This team has had a full plate, but I think a focus on finding new visitors, generating new excitement is something that I'd like to work on. And I think that's all. I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Beth. So, let me just say a few things about immediate past and future. One of the nicest things that happened to us in the past several months was having 325 people pay $125 to come to a gala at the Gideon Putnam Hotel and help us raise money for our future plans for the top of the mountain. We had Ulysses Grant Dietz, who was our virtual master of ceremonies. We had a good deal of people inside the Gideon Putnam Hotel. We capped it at 325. We could have had 400 people in there, but we felt that would be overloading it, especially since people were paying handsomely for the privilege. Treat Williams was one of our guests. He is now one of our advisory committee members, and he promises to bring his notoriety to the benefit of Grand Cottage, and he lives in Manchester, Vermont, but he's just signed a contract to be involved in a few more things, so I'm not sure how much time he can spend. He wanted to be on our board of trustees, but he's going to be doing a lot of travel in the next year, so we created a special spot for him. Of course, Ron Chernow, the author of the most recent, perhaps the most famous biography of General Grant, was also at this event, and he was a major draw that allowed us to have something very special. We raised, as Mike said, we cleared about 20 grand on that event. And that used to be a lot of money, but unfortunately it isn't anymore. And we also had General David Petraeus, who was with us on that night. All of these people gave us name recognition. We had people from around the community who were people of serious purpose. And we had many political types who will be beneficial to us in the long term, who were there as well, including Senator Janisco. So that was a major event for us last year. It took a lot of resources, and it was put together by our staff team, and it really was a home run. Most people generally agree. We got a great deal of press attention from it before and after, and more importantly, it's going to help us go to the next phase, which, as was alluded to by a couple of our earlier staff people, we paid through a grant $50,000 for a master plan to be designed by the LA group in Saratoga Springs. We've been working with them for the past 18 months or so. This is the existing map of what's up on the top of Mount McGregor. And here you have the visitor center, and there you have the cottage, and you have the roads around it. And here you have the area inside the razor wire of the prison, known as the ball field. I can remember getting a few softballs because when they hit a home run, they were not allowed to retrieve the softballs. And so I have a couple in the trunk of my car. But this ball field was deeded to us a little over a year ago. We've been lobbying for it since the prison. Remember, the prison closed 9 years ago this summer, 2014. And that's how long we've been trying to get that ball field. And we just got it a year ago. So these things are incremental. You've got to have a long-term vision when you're talking about an historic site. And what we plan to do in the not so, and I believe the razor wire, has that been removed yet?
It's going to be early May.
Early May, we're going to have the razor wire removed, probably because it's made of stainless steel and it's got some value. But it will help that look better. And then we also have the key to open up a gate, don't we?
Yes.
To go inside of this 4.2 acre site. But our plan is ultimately to use some of these sites to create special parking, an event pavilion, picnic grounds, new trails that were referred to by Beth. This is the plan put together by the LA group, the landscape architectural firm, and they believe that at some point in the not so distant future, when we raise $1 billion in a variety of ways, we can put together additional parking, an event pavilion where we would do educational programs, concerts, reenactments, etc. And here's the cottage again, here's the visitor center. It would still retain some of the limited parking we have in front of the visitor center, but we would add more parking on part of that ball field. And more importantly, what would happen is we would create yet another overlook with a magnificent view from near that ball field. The overlook, which could look like this, and an event pavilion, which could look like that. Here are a couple of similar event pavilions in the real world in other parts of the Adirondacks. A lot of Parks and Rec, through its People's Island conservators, removed everything of historic value out of these rooms throughout the building. And in the basement, I'm getting these pictures from the person who's actually installing the fire suppression system. He has an entire crew there. I'm going to be interviewing him on the 2nd of May and putting a video together to describe to people what's taking place and perhaps why we have this delay. This is what's taking place in the cellar. So there's a great deal of equipment. The way this works, in layman's terms, is we are having installed a nitrogen misting system, which is state-of-the-art. And when it's state-of-the-art, it's very expensive, especially inside of an historic building. And this is going to create a fire suppression system so that if the place were to be hit by lightning, that this misting would go on and it would cause little or no damage to any of the artifacts inside, but it would starve the building of oxygen containing the fire. That's how it works. The plumbing for that is in the basement, but there are pipes that go up through the entire building. They needed to be installed. Look at it. You might recognize some of these rooms, volunteers. There are quite a few elements to this construction project. Again, these were given to me by the people who have been working since December, largely in the basement and other parts of the building, constructing different elements that need to be a part of this fire suppression system. But that the fact that you have a major construction project that has and will delay, for we hope only 2 weeks, the normal opening of the cottage to the public. You and I thank you for your patience during our annual meeting. Thank you very much.
Been on the mountain for what we thought was going to be the last public event ever held up there. It was the centennial year of Grant Cottage functioning as a historic site. And Department of Corrections was going to take over the building for office space, and all the collections were going to storage. I was up there because I knew and C.A. Gambino, she was a role model for me, and I wanted my daughter to see where she had committed herself on that mountain for since 1913, when she first lived on the mountain. But there was the foremost Grant scholar in the country who gave a talk, and I realized the game wasn't over yet. There were national politicians, national historians who were making a big noise, but I realized there wasn't the voice of the people involved in that. So I thought a petition drive might help, and I asked around, and I was pointed down the mountain to go to the Wilton Heritage Society and talk to Lorraine Westcott. She agreed to support the petitions. We were successful. Parks quickly, the grassroots petition helped add the voice that was needed for parks to change their minds. And the cottage was funded by legislative grants. Brookside was approached to mentor a new friends group. It was Lorraine who called me in late summer, and I hung up the secretary, first appointed secretary of Friends. It was Lorraine's leadership, energy, and commitment that made things work initially. And she served on the first elected board of Friends. So I am indebted to her personally for her mentorship and the role model that she provided my children, who regarded her as an extended family member. Now Steve. Steve introduced himself to the board 16 years ago via a letter and quickly became an essential tour guide. He then began developing scripts. I counted more than 64 scripts that he has developed over the years, and they cover an amazing range. Civil War, Brave calls Lincoln, the motive chase, Confederates in Vermont, the Irish Brigade in the Fenians, Grant as president, site-related programs on Sam Willett, Duncan McGregor, the Mount McGregor Railroad, Charles Wood, Oliver Clark, the women caretakers of the cottage, supporting people in Grant's life that were with him in his final days. We also started portraying together the Clarks, the story of the Clarks, and as U.S. Julia Grant. That's not all. Beyond that, Steve never had a set program. When he began to do outreach in the community, he would tailor things to the communities that he was going to research. What local regiments were involved, and had names to give people that were attending these talks. He gave over 100 in 10 years. He averaged 2,500 riding miles. He paid for it. He only allowed us a few times to get in gas cards. I mean, this was all at his expense. His period clothing he provided out of pocket. His programs went as far west as Rochester, south as far as Newburgh, east into Vermont, Connecticut, and all over the North Country area. His outreach brought, it's hard to estimate, at least several hundred people as a result of your outreach programs. And if there was a check involved, it was always turned over to the cottage. This man has never been taken a fee for himself. He's also known. In 2012, we published Saving Grant, a house survivor in Andersonville, a housewife, a medical missionary, an immigrant from Japan, and others saved a precious piece of our history. All profits, then and since, have gone to Friends. In 2017, another one was published, General Grant Supporting Players, which features the biographies of Duncan McGregor, Harrison Terrell, Sam Willett, and Charles Wood, and how their stories figured into the 1885 story. So it is one of the great pleasures of my life to present you, Steve, with this year's
And Melissa mentioned that over the years I wrote over 50 different programs. I still have those scripts. If you don't want to have General Grant every day, pick a topic, and I bet I have something written about it that I can present.
Duncan McGregor and his kilt.
What?
Duncan McGregor and his kilt.
Duncan McGregor in his kilt. That is a sight to behold.